Forgive and forget. Forgiveness, we know, is a wonderful thing that we can do for ourselves and for others. Forgetting, is that appropriate? Maybe you need to remember the indiscretion to make sure that you're not vulnerable thereafter. Protect yourself in the future. So, do you forget? Should you forget? And even more so, can you forget? Life at times is a challenge and difficult when someone does an indiscretion towards us. Sometimes it might be small, it might be big. So to be forgiving, we know is a very good quality. But forgetting, where do we stand with that? Welcome to Tanya Today. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you for Chabad Zich and Kadeshin in Montreal, Canada, where it's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. We learn today chapter 2 of Igeres Tshuva, the epistle, the letter, 12 chapters of tshuva, penitence, return to Hashem. We have spoken in the previous chapter about the basic idea of what return to Hashem means. It means to abandon our negative ways, something that's against the will of God. And we accept the yoke of the king, the will of God upon us. We express that verbally, which does away with the body of the sin, and the soul of the sin. We also express that by the regret that we have for doing whatever wrong thing we have done. That's called taking ownership. What the Alter Rebbe further explained is that people have a mistaken notion that fasting is a part of tshuva. And we explained it's not. Even though Yom Kippur we fast, and it sounds to be, and it feels perhaps to be synonymous with tshuva, with penitence, but it's not. We see that sometimes fasting is used as a tool to arouse us to maybe do tshuva. Fasting can be to annul a future decree that's hanging over, or a decree that's hanging now in the present and into the future, that it could be used to annul a decree. But the concept of return to God, which means to own something of the past and to fix that which needs to be fixed, so all there is penitence. Sometimes you have to wait till Yom Kippur and your deeper penitence of Yom Kippur. There can be also some suffering that a person has to go through, as we explained the 3 different levels based on the Brisa, as we began in chapter 1. But fasting is not a part. Now, when we speak about tshuva, tshuva means, right, forgiveness, to be pardoned completely, right, when you have violated the command of the king. You violated, and now you're forgiven, you're pardoned. Because you've done tshuva, fully repented, right? And as we said, that doesn't require fasting. And when we do tshuva properly, then there's no accusation left against us, right? So whether whether it's to God or to somebody that you need to make amends, right? When you do it, there's no judgment left. We're completely exonerated, right? But that's called forgiveness. But the question then is to forget, which is not the proper term to use in front of God or in reference to God. Maybe for our sake, we would say, do you forget it? So to put it in different terms, even though you do something wrong, let's say to a friend, right? So now that you've asked for forgiveness, a contrite heart, and you really mean it, you really mean it, you you're not going to be in the same standing as you were before you sinned. Well, which kind of makes sense. Before God is the same thing. You did something wrong. You're not going to be in the same standing. God forgives, but it doesn't mean you're in the same standing. How do you get back to be in the same standing as you were before the sin, which means lerotzain, to be acceptable, to be beloved before God as if you didn't sin, right? So back in the day, the times of the Holy Temple, what did the Jew do? They brought an oila sacrifice, a burnt offering. You brought a sin offering if you needed to, because of an inadvertent sin, if it was inadvertent, and you bring a oila offering, a burnt offering to God, right? If you transgress a positive commandment. And our sages explain, as the verse says in Leviticus and Vayikra, that you will then be nirtzaloi, be acceptable before God as you were before you had sinned. In other words, in human terms, forget. We used human terms, right? Forgive and forgetting. And we find that in the Talmud, that that's what the burnt offering, right, is this gift that you bring after you've been pardoned. And the metaphor is like you did something to the king that displeased him. You begged for forgiveness. You had a contrite heart and you really felt bad for what you did. The king's forgiving. What do you do after that? You bring a gift to the king. You send a gift in order that when you will stand before the king again, the king will see you favorably as the king saw you before you did an indiscretion towards the king. That's what it means. So to be acceptable before God as you were before you sinned is not tshuva. Tshuva is forgiveness, atonement, cleansing. You're completely cleansed with tshuva. You don't need to bring a gift, right, when you are. But that's about you. But that the other person should look at you in the same way that they did before the sin, you bring the gift. So the gift to God is the sacrifice. That's what the sacrifices were. And that's what it says in the right, that it says in the verse, nachas ruach l'kainei, to bring a gratification to our Creator, right? You said you're sorry to your spouse, then afterwards you bring flowers, right? So that you should be perfect and acceptable as you were before. Huh?
Yes, flowers says.
Sorry?
Two flowers.
So that sounds amazing. So we see here clearly concept of forgiving and forgetting, or better yet, better than forgetting, is that you see the person as you saw them before they sinned, right? Which is amazing. So what do we do today now? We do not have offerings. So you know what we do? When you put an offering on the altar, you're taking the fats and the blood of the animal and putting it on the altar, right? Well, we also have fat. We also have blood. You can also put that on the altar. How? Fasting. This is where fasting comes in. Not for tshuva. It's not for penitence. It's not for return to God. That's not part of returning to God. But to be pleasing before God as a person was before they did an indiscretion, before they did some sin. That's the concept. Fasting replaces the offerings. And again, why? Because that makes us makes us acceptable before God as we were before we sinned. So we see this in the Talmud, our sages, even for trivial things that they did, they fasted, and they fasted a lot. It says, an example, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. So he believed that a cow can go out wearing a strap between its horns on Shabbos. Remember, our animals also have to keep Shabbos, right? All right. So wearing a strap, he said a strap. The sages said you're not allowed to. The halacha is not according to him. It's according to the sages because they're the majority, right? He saw once a neighbor who the cow went out with a strap and he didn't say anything to him, right? He didn't fulfill, what the halacha was based on the sages, his colleagues, who the halachic rendering is according to them. He fasted so long because he felt terrible that he did not fulfill properly, you know, the words of the law till his teeth were blackened. Now, this is a holy man, right? Don't try this at home. It says, Rabbi Yeshua also fasted so many times when he said something, about Beis Shammai's words. Rav Huna, his tefillin strap were the opposite side. He fasted 40 fasts. And there's so many instances in the Torah that tells us this concept in the Talmud. Based on that, the Arizal, modern day Kabbalist in the 16th century, so he put a number of fasts that one should undertake for transgressions. Now listen, folks, listen carefully. And what I'm going to say is don't even try any of this at home, right? But most importantly, don't do the sin in order that you don't have to do any fasts. But we will see, not today, but in forthcoming classes, about how we deal with fasting today. And just to let you know, don't try this till we've learned together. Because we will see when we come to a conclusion that there's a different take on things. But we're going through a process, right? So the Arizal says, exactly. We're too fragile, exactly. The Arizal says that if you get angry, just one time, you have to fast 151 fasts in order to be pleasing before God. Now, the fasting is in the place of tshuva. Tshuva you have to do, penitence you have to do, return to God. That's the first thing you need to do. But if you want to be pleasing before God because you got angry, 151 fasts. If you transgress a rabbinic prohibition, such as drinking a wine that wasn't, based on rabbinic law, not not kosher. 73 fasts. If you neglect your prayer, you forgot to pray. 61 fasts. Ooh. Again, this is to be desirable before God as you were before. That's the concept of fasting, because that's a replacing of the sacrifice that would be on the altar, which seems maybe it was a bit easier. But we will learn that there's another alternative on what we need to do today. So again, don't go looking for fasting because you got angry yesterday at someone. Just stop getting angry. Any questions? Any comments? Can you do half fast? We're going to learn about that, Jeff. Excellent question. Can you do half fast? Yes. But even that, let's we're going to learn more about that and see what is the appropriate thing to do. Yes, Amram.
Anger is a positive role. The reason why um, God gets angry a fraction of a second during each day is to give us the power that when we fall, when we sin, that we get angry at our Yetzer Hara and come back with force,
Right.
divine force to fight.
Yeah. So if you're going to get angry at yourself for doing something wrong, we're not talking about that. We're talking about you got angry at somebody else, right? Patricia's a bit shocked by the numbers. Yeah, they are kind of, don't worry, don't even do this. Don't even try this. Back in the day, holy people did, even actually, but as we see from the Talmud, we're talking about holy people, that inadvertent things that were done, right? Inadvertent. He didn't rebuke his neighbor. He didn't do anything wrong himself, but that is wrong, right? His tefillin strap was wrong side. A holy person is so sensitive to things that won't happen, right? Fast 40 days. No one should do that, right? As Amram said, and the Alter Rebbe will say later, we don't have the strength for that. But why are we learning this? First of all, it shows us that to really fix something, you fixed it, but to make yourself so pleasing before God as if there was no sin, as if nothing ever happened. That's like, it takes a lot. And that's this concept over here. But we'll see. We'll have a much simpler, I don't know, simpler, yeah, I guess simpler, not at least, we say every night before we go to sleep, by Kriya Shema, by the Shema before we go to sleep, we say something very interesting. Page 141 in the Blue Siddur, Master of the Universe, I hereby forgive. These are the first things we say before we go to sleep. Imagine, you can't go to sleep unless you say this properly. At least you can't go to sleep. I hereby forgive. So you're forgiving. We mentioned forgiveness is not about the other person. It's about you being forgiving, right? I hereby forgive anyone who has angered, vexed me, or sinned against me, either physically or financially, against my honor, or anything else that is mine, whether accidentally or intentionally, inadvertently or deliberately, by speech or by deed. Here's a kicker. In this incarnation or in any other, another incarnation. So they ask a question. Student asks a question. How could it be that what do you mean in this incarnation, another incarnation? Was, first of all. And secondly, questions asked by Chassidim and this. If you're a Chassid, that's when you forgave a person. You waited a whole day, held on to it, and weren't able to be forgiving until you went to sleep. And God kind of forced you to be forgiving because you had to say that, or maybe you just mumbled it and didn't mean it. Sometimes at night, you're tired and you're not focused, which happens to me. That's the truth. Because a chassid will be forgiving forthright. So with that, we can understand why are we saying it at night then? That's why we say in this incarnation or in another incarnation. In other words, in another incarnation, maybe I wasn't a chassid, and therefore I wasn't forgiving. Okay, I'll be forgiving now. That's how powerful it is and how important it is to be forgiving. The first thing when we go to sleep, that we should have a good night's sleep, is to be forgiving. Truly divine. Any questions, any comments? Okay, I don't see. All right, we're going to go into Rambam now. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Zich in Kadesh in Montreal, Canada, where it's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. Have an amazing, great day.